This podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. This is Gary Minchell. Some thoughts on manufacturing and technology. Interestingly enough, I've just returned from Folsom, California. I was going to say Sacramento, but I flew into Sacramento, drove up to Folsom to the annual Ignition Community Conference, and rather than users conference, they call it community with good reason because they've developed a community, and that's what they're striving for, with some very good feedback from their customers. And this would be inductive automation, and a couple of thoughts on business models and technology that I picked up while I was there. I met Steve Hechtman probably 2003, at the end of 2003, beginning of 2004, somewhere in there, and he told me that he had developed a new company called Inductive Automation. He was going to do HMI SCADA. He was going to do it a lot of things in a different way. First off, he started this company. He had been a systems integrator, saw a need for a couple of things, got a couple of University of California, Davis computer scientists that were database gurus, among other things. And number one, they built a new SCADA platform back then from the ground up using IT-friendly technologies and the ability to host in the cloud, if you will. And remember, in 2004, we were just barely talking about the cloud, and many people were suspicious about the whole thing. So he built with that. And the second thing was a different business model. He also built the company from the ground up, so the technology from the ground up, the company from the ground up, and it was built around a different business model rather than selling seats. So that's the as we know, the big deal in software is you buy X number of seats and you pay a yearly or whatever subscription fee for all that, and it's a bit cumbersome for the end user and also expensive for the end user. If you're buying seats for people that only use the software occasionally. The other problem that kind of came along with this whole model had to do with updates and how do I handle updates in a more user-friendly manner, and so on. So we have modern programming languages, modern technologies, a modern look at HMI SCADA, and a modern way to sell the software. I mean, all God's children got to eat, so you got to sell that. So 13 years later, I go to the conference, and for the second straight year, the community conference is sold out. They like to hold it in Folsom. It's right beside their headquarters building, and it's a nice location, but unfortunately the venue is a bit limited, and they can't grow anymore with it, which I suppose is good or bad. But a bunch of new people there, a bunch of old-timers there. I get to meet, I've been there, I think, 3 years in a row, and I've gotten to meet some really interesting people and really smart people. Other technologies. So the SCADA, I wrote a blog post like, what's SCADA? And I keep asking all of that. And for the big companies that do process automation or other automation and so on, SCADA is kind of like a niche product for them. Maybe they do a little bit. And for a couple of companies, the principal players really have become inductive automation, who has been growing and growing and growing. And there are no market share numbers, absolutely none that I trust. But that company, I believe, has grabbed a substantial share of the market. The other one would be Wonderware, well known. It was one of the first, if not the first, companies to go on Windows. And back when it started, that was revolutionary. But times have gone on and times have gone on, and Wonderware has had a series of owners which have kind of screwed them up. But they just had their conference, which I was not able to go to, and they still have a lot of people there. So those are the major ones. Other ones got bought up by Schneider Electric, as did Wonderware eventually. GE owns a competitor, but we don't hear much about it anymore. In the old days, it was called Intolution. and quite thriving in its day, and still around in many guises through GE. And some of the smaller players have been bought up, but Iconics still lives, and it's a smaller player, but always on the forefront of technology also. But anyway, Inductive has executed its plan well, and it's built an IT-friendly platform that is able to adapt to the times and continue to grow and improve over time. I talked to many users, and they're just ecstatic with it. They love the pricing model. They believe they're getting value for their buck, if you will. It's international. There were people from many places around the world at the conference. Interestingly, they go to business to market principally through systems integrators, and so a few other companies were there who are partners who also go to market in a similar way, and they're quite interesting. Bedrock Automation has been showing the last few years. Bedrock is built ground up. Principally hardware security, but with security in mind, and they do a lot of things. And you talk to the CTO, typically and appreciatively geeky, talking about how the hardware controller, it's essentially a PLC or a controller platform, has a number of security things built in. Like everything, it doesn't address every security issue you're going to wind up with, but it addresses a number of them. And you can read my blog post for more about Bedrock Automation. Opto 22 is there. Opto goes to business to market in a similar way. Has been around quite some time. I've known about them since before I was an editor in the late 90s. And they're always at this intersection. It's kind of like the data intersection of control and IT. And for many years, they have been a vehicle for getting data from the control or the automation realm into the IT realm. And IT people have been hungry for this for years and years, and they're finding better and better ways to get their information. New player, not a new player, but kind of a new player there, Easy Automation. Interestingly enough, they bill themselves as made in America, but I've known them for many, many years, and they've had plants around the world for quite some time. They have a lot of production done in Romania and other places in Eastern Europe, and nothing wrong with that. I'm not opposed to the Romanians, but at any rate, they typically made HMIs, but they recently came out with a small PLC, and like Opto 22 and Easy Automation, they've jumped onto the MQTT bandwagon, and or whatever. And MQTT is a transport. It's a middleware transport to move data from here to there, and it's lightweight, developed by Arlen Nipper and some people from IBM, and he got it off, and is building a company to exploit that technology. And he's also developed a technology that is kind of like an OPC Lite, if you will. It's called Sparkplug. And Easy Automation especially, and I think Opto 22, they didn't really promote it when I talked to them, but doesn't mean they don't do it. I have been using that because for lightweight data communications, Sparkplug is like an information model. OPC UA is a robust information model. Sparkplug is a more lightweight one that you can apply quickly and get some quick pieces of information without all of the metadata and data that you would get with an OPC UA. Both Sparkplug and OPC UA can transport over MQTT, so you don't let yourself get confused by all that. There are transport things, and then there's data models, and so on. But that's probably the most of they saw there. An interesting ecosystem of partner companies in different kinds of things. And so SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition is SCADA. Mostly we're talking these days about data acquisition, and guess what data acquisition is? Today we call it the Internet of Things. And so a lot of people have discovered the Internet of Things, but what is interesting is that in industry and production, we have been doing that for a long time, years, 30 years maybe, in even digital, doing it a long time. We have remote things, or maybe water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, oil pipelines, a number of kinds of applications where You need to bring data in. Perhaps you don't want to send people out there all the time and that sort of thing. And that would be connected devices and coming back to a central location, and that would be SCADA or it would be the Internet of Things. So we've been doing that, and so companies like Inductive Automation, you actually do the Internet of Things even before we even called it that. And there wasn't a lot of exact talk about IoT there, but it was kind of like everywhere. And SCADA, I kind of look at the market that way as kind of an updated version as it keeps growing, or at least the companies like Inductive that keep it going, keep progressing, really are Internet of Things players. And Opto22, I know, has spoken at some IoT events, and because they're assertive, they get out there, well, aggressive, they get out there and promote the latest technologies that I say cross OT and IT. Anyway, this is Gary Mitchell. I spent some time at Inductive Automation in Folsom, California, and met a whole bunch of other people, and just taking a look at SCADA, Internet of Things, and a little glimpse at the future, perhaps, of pricing software. And this podcast, as all my podcasts, is sponsored by Ignition from Inductive Automation. Have a good day.